With my feet frozen on the Chicago concrete, my fists clenched at my waist and the barrel aimed at my chest, I stared into the eyes of my would-be executioner as he pulled the trigger. In that split second, I was flooded with an uncomfortable sense of either irony or regret, all because of an argument I had just had with my brothers. You see, it's 2011. And for the millionth time, standing in our mother's kitchen, we're arguing over NFL Madden, a video game. The most popular NFL video game in the world the last 25 years. And we are going back and forth about who is the king of Madden. Who has the most wins, scored the most touchdowns, forced the most interceptions. Now, relatively speaking, it was a pretty stupid argument, but to my brothers and I, it has always been everything. You see, growing up in Chicago on the South Side, we moved around a lot, like a lot. We never had the security of a childhood home, so for my brothers and I, arguing and playing Madden was our constant. It was our comfort zone. Seriously. I can remember where we lived in the city based on the version of Madden we owned. I remember in the early 90s, we lived in Avalon Park because we had Madden on the first Sega Genesis. And my older brother Josh used to beat my younger brother and Bernard and I's asses. And then in the late 90s, I remember we moved from Gresham to Inglewood because that's the year I learned to force interceptions. Madden calls interceptions user picks, and Josh quickly learned user picks mean user loser. And then throughout the early and mid-2000s, we were the brotherhood of the traveling Madden. As we moved from Woodlawn to Washington Heights to Chicago Heights, the game moved with us. And throughout those years, each of us experienced win streaks, loss streaks, and in the middle, there was this terrifying gambling streak between the two of them that got really out of hand. But now it's 2011, and for the millionth time, we're standing in our mother's kitchen going back and forth about who is the king of Madden. Who got the most wins, who scored the most touchdowns, who forced the most interceptions when Josh deads the conversation and says, we can prove this right now, little bros. All we got to do is get the game and bring it back. And the next thing I know, we're jumping in our mother's truck, and the trip to Inglewood from Chicago Heights is over like that. Josh hops out the car, and Bernard and I go back to business as usual, lobbing jokes and insults at one another. And at one point, Bernard stops and says, hey, as long as Josh loses, I'm cool. And in the middle of our laughing, we realize that seconds have turned into minutes. And together we go to look out the driver's side window and see Josh on the ground and a man standing over him with a gun. Bernard goes for his seatbelt, and I jump out the passenger door, and as I round the back of the truck, all I can hear is the sound of false starts. Click, click, click. With the urgency of fourth down, I call for my brother to run. Briefly distracted by Bernard and I, the man turns his attention just long enough for Josh to jump to his feet and push the individual. Bleeding from his head and dazed, Josh runs towards Bernard, and when I go to turn, the man has regained his balance. And with my feet frozen on the Chicago concrete, my fists clenched at my waist and the barrel aimed at my chest, I stared into the eyes of a frightened young man as he pulled the trigger. Click. And without hesitation, I reached for the back door and jumped in, and all of a sudden, the gun went off like Aaron Rodgers just completed the bullet pass for a touchdown. And my brothers go silent like Bears fan, and Aaron Rodgers just completed the bullet pass for the touchdown. Chaos ensues as the man goes to each of us, guns at our heads, screaming, "Give me everything." And as we hand over phones and wallets, he continues, "Give me everything." He puts the gun at my brother's head and asks for the car keys, and foolishly I respond, "You have everything you are going to get, but you cannot take our mother's car." It was the longest 30 seconds of my life before the man decided to run off into the darkness. Panicked, my brother and I pull off, comforted with our lives, confused with the situation as we are flooded with a sense of either irony or regret. In the silence, I look at the clock in front of me that reads 12:30, and I put my hands on my brother's shoulders and say, "Merry Christmas." And Josh turns around and stares me directly in my eyes and says, "Fuck Christmas. He stole the Madden, bro."
Give it up for Jacoby, everybody.